It's Thursday, March 25th, and welcome to the New York Amsterdam News Podcast. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. My guest for this episode is Andrea James, who is the founder and executive director of the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. She's going to be speaking with me about the group's campaign advocating for President Joe Biden to grant clemency to 100 women within his first 100 days in office. Well, over 231,000 women and girls are incarcerated in federal facilities across the country. Black women are 1.7 times more likely to be incarcerated than white women, many of whom are serving decades-long sentences for limited involvement in drug and conspiracy offenses. The National Council wants President Biden to grant clemency to 100 women. The group says clemency is an immediate action Biden can take to swiftly begin the process for ending mass incarceration impacting communities of color. Andrea James is the founder and executive director of the National Council and is leading the effort to get clemency granted to 100 women. She's on the phone with me now to talk about it. Welcome to the podcast, Andrea. How are you?
Doing really great. Thank you very much for inviting us here today.
Absolutely. Well, this is such an important issue. Well, I first want to read out these numbers to you again. Over 231,000 women and girls incarcerated in federal facilities across the country, and black women are 1.7 times more likely to be incarcerated than white women, and many of whom are serving decades-long sentences for limited involvement in drug and conspiracy offenses. Before we get into what's going on with clemency, I do want you to talk about this issue first so we can kind of get an idea of what is going on exactly.
Well, yeah, we are, our organization, the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls, started back in 2010 inside of a federal prison. We like to call them prisons as opposed to facilities because we want to speak truth into the language of what this issue actually is. And we sat in a prison yard in 2010 in a women's federal prison in Danbury, Connecticut, and we heard the uptick in the need to end what the country referred to then as mass incarceration. And Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, had just come out. Yet as women who were currently incarcerated in the federal system, we actually heard nothing about us. We heard nothing about the fact that we were predominantly black women. Most of the women, not myself, I was a former lawyer who was there convicted of wire fraud under a mortgage issue, but out of my law office. However, the majority of women who were serving sentences in the federal system were there because of the policies created under the 1994 Crime Act that landed them on a prison bunk for decades for drug convictions and were caught in this wide cast net under conspiracy. And so those are two issues that we don't really quite talk about or understand, the issue of women in general and incarceration and what policies that were passed that would not have passed today led to the increase in incarceration of women. Also, the effect that the incarceration of women, particularly from black communities, has had on the disruption in our families, the disruption in our economics in our communities that came at the heels of the war on drugs and the intentional incarceration of black men. And prior to that, women had been entangled in the criminal legal system because we were the ones who were caring for the communities and the men and standing in the gap from the lack of resources and investment in our communities because since 1996 to 2008 in this country, a new prison was built every 10 days. And it was filled across this country, state, county jails, and federal prisons filled with black people from black communities around this country. So women were holding that up, the what was left of the support in our communities, and then they began to become the fastest growing incarceration population in the country. We don't talk about that.
No, we don't at all. And it's interesting. Whenever we have a conversation about incarceration, mass incarceration in this country, we tend to see images, even on television shows, in the media, we see images of men. When we talk about when we talk about prisons and incarceration, we see a lot of images of men. Your organization very, very active in getting Joe Biden in his first 50 days in office, which was marked this month. And there have been a lot of executive orders on private facilities, racial justice measures, and things like that. But you're saying that he's been relatively quiet on the issue about clemency, granting clemency to women, and President Biden recently announced that he wants to grant clemency to 100 women within his first 100 days of office. Can you talk a little bit about that and how your organization is playing a role in that?
Well, certainly. We knew the importance of the first 100 days in any new president's administration. It sets the trajectory for the work that they intend on making a priority. And for us, we knew we worked very hard, and we were very intentional about our work under President Obama's administration with his Clemency Project. And we were instrumental in pushing out just a lot of women who were serving these draconian, including life with no parole, drug conviction sentences. And there were lots of women who were still left behind. Our campaign coordinator, Danielle Metz, was the last woman that we were able and instrumental in pushing out under President Obama's administration. Well, we know that President Biden, because he was he was the vice president under that absolutely important initiative, understands the importance of correcting some of the criminal justice missteps in the past that led to this mass incarceration, this uptick in incarceration of women, particularly Black women. And so we knew that we had to step up and raise our voices and actually present a plan for the president's first 100 days that, in addition to climate and in addition to the other priorities that he has carved out, immigration, that we also remind President Biden that racial justice, which was one of his executive orders, a focus on racial justice and healing in this country, has to include clemency, and that clemency is racial justice. Clemency is a way that President Biden can stand up and speak to the throngs of Black women, Black formerly incarcerated women, that after the prior president, we knew that we had to do something significant to turn this around to a racial justice issue and to begin to speak out to say, we stand with you, President Biden. We supported your campaign because we believed you when you said that racial justice would be at the center of your presidency. But we want you to also understand that we are the same women who supported you that are saying clemency is racial justice. It is one of the easiest ways with a stroke of a pen that you can correct some of the misjustice that these women are enduring. These women that are on our 100 women list for a consideration of 100 women to be freed through clemency in his first 100 days are women that have been buried in federal prisons for decades. They are there for drug convictions, and most of them are there because of clemency, because of conspiracy. And we don't quite understand what that means, but for conspiracy, prosecutors could not legitimize the prosecution, the indictments, the prosecution, the incarceration, and the lengths of sentences, including mandatory minimums, that many of these women received because this wide net that was allowed because of conspiracy was cast, and they were caught up in that net. And so we're asking President Biden in his first 100 days to please demonstrate to us that he understands that clemency is racial justice, and it's a tool that should not be used just as a gift at the end of a presidency. It's a great opportunity to use this tool, this executive power that he doesn't have to wait to use, to demonstrate that he does understand that clemency is racial justice.
Absolutely. I just want to make a quick correction on my behalf. I misspoke. The National Council is actually campaigning advocating for President Biden to grant clemency to 100 women within the first 100 days. Just want to make that correction on my behalf. I misspoke. One of the questions I did want to ask you also is a lot of people are listening to this and hearing about this. And I want you to explain something. There's a difference between clemency and pardon. And while it might be kind of simple, I want you to explain the difference between that, because we see that happen a lot of times. Presidents give pardons and presidents also give clemency. What's the difference between the two?
Clemency is a tool that's an executive power that is used to end the current incarceration, the holding of a person's body within a prison. That commutation, or those terms are used interchangeably, clemency and commutation, allows a president or a governor, if it's a state, to say, I am going to provide relief to this person, to grant them clemency, which will allow them to come out of the prison. It doesn't exonerate them. It doesn't clear away even any additional requirements that keep them bound to the state or federal criminal legal system. Under President Obama's clemency project, for instance, many people, over 1,000 people, were granted clemency. However, they still have and are still enduring significant ties to the criminal legal system through federal probation. We eradicated federal parole many years ago, so there's something called supervised release. They still have requirements. Some of them are still on lifetime parole, for instance. A pardon is something that is granted to somebody post-incarceration. It is granted to people who have been out of prison and they're petitioning to the president, for instance, in the president's case, to grant them a pardon, which means you are actually admitting to your transgression, but you are pardoned from all of the repercussions and consequences and fallout from that. It wipes your slate clean so that you get back your Second Amendment rights, for instance. You are cleared of restitution that may have come out of a particular case. You're cleared of the conviction and having a record of conviction where it just kind of wipes the slate clean. It's the timing that is the difference. Clemency is an action that the president has the power to do with the stroke of a pen for people who are currently incarcerated, to end that segment, that part of their incarceration, that will allow them to come out of prison, regardless of whether there are stipulations still placed upon them. A pardon is something that there's a process where once you are out of prison, you can apply that will exonerate you from the transgression and from the conviction.
All right. Your organization does a lot of advocacy work, obviously, for incarcerated women and formerly incarcerated women. I want you to talk about the conditions that we're seeing in our women's prisons right now. And I'll use the example of Edna Mann Correctional Facility in New Jersey, who has, that facility has a uninterrupted, well-documented history. In fact, the U.S. Justice Department said that there's an open secret of sexual misconduct in that prison. And that's just one. Can you speak on that and what issues we're having? Because obviously this is something that's going on that maybe not a lot of people know about, but recently kind of broke because of what's happening at Edna Mann. But tell us about what conditions we're seeing in our women's prisons.
Well, listen, we always say that there was a pandemic inside of women's prisons long before the COVID-19 pandemic. Right. And that pandemic was sexual abuse. It was the perpetuation of trauma. A prison will never be a place for a woman or a girl to heal and advance her life. Prisons cause further harm. Prisons cause further trauma, particularly in the lives of women, where we have an upwards of 85% of currently incarcerated women who are victims of sexual violence, many starting from childhood, from when they were girls, that was unaddressed, that was untreated, that was unrecognized, that was even unacknowledged. For a number of reasons, particularly in Black women and in young Black girls, where we are always entangled in this issue of fighting to stop the adulteration of Black girls and their trauma from sexual abuse not being treated and acknowledged as trauma, needing significant attention. Resources have not been applied to that. The work of Monique Morris and her book Push Out just explains that to us in the Black Women's Justice Institute. They focus on this work. But so why women land on a prison bunk are reasons that we don't talk about and have created just increased trauma, sending them into the culture of incarceration, which is the problem. The culture of we can build shiny new prisons and say that we can build trauma-informed prisons now, which is what the kind of going talk is amongst state governors and prison builders. But the fact of the matter is there is no trauma-informed prison, and we need to keep women in our communities, and we have created these alternatives and these better solutions. But to get to your point, the horrors that we have heard from the reports from the Justice Department, not only at Edna, man, we could talk about Lowell, the horrors of happening with our incredible work down in Florida with Deborah Bennett and our organizing space Change Comes Now, attacking and rising to the forefront of the issues of the trauma and the sexual violence and abuse that happens to women who are incarcerated in Lowell prison as well in Florida, in Edna Man. But I'm going to tell you, this happens in every single prison, every single jail in this country. Wow. This is not an anomaly. This is not something that is just a one-off. You have a culture where men are prison guards who are abusing women psychologically, emotionally, and physically. And that is a pattern. That is why prisons will never be the answer and will never begin to get us on a track where women can begin to heal and advance their lives. And women are in vulnerable positions where many of them are just simply desperate to speak to their children, to communicate with their families. They need feminine hygiene products. They have cultural products that are necessary that they can only purchase on commissary, if commissary even provides for those things. Prisons are destitute places that rob people of their dignity. And when women are in those situations, oftentimes they become vulnerable to the advances of prison guards who very well know that they wield and hold the power within that place. And women are victimized in many ways. This is an ongoing, daily occurrence across the country.
I have to tell you, when I was reporting on what happened or what is happening at Edna Man, I was just mortified with just not only the details. And just to give you all an idea, there were 31 correctional staff members, I should say, that were suspended actually earlier this year, I think probably in February or January, because of sexual abuse that had been going on in the facility for such a long time. I mean, we're talking about issues that have been going back to the 90s at Edna Man. And again, that's just one prison that is experiencing that. And you're saying that this is happening at all of our women's prisons across the country, which is just absolutely mind-boggling. So I guess the question is, what are the next steps here? Because you want President Biden to grant clemency to 100 women within his first 100 days. And what are your steps going forward to try and get that done? And I think, and even more women, getting clemency. What are your steps going forward?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have 100 women that are attached to that number, who are real women with names and time behind them, significant time, decades in federal prison, women who are sick. 30 of our women on that 100 women list are women who are in Caswell, which is the medical facility for the federal system, the medical prison in the federal system. And these women are sick. They're terminally ill. They're in various stages, some of them stage 4 cancer. If you just go to the federal prison at Carswell, you will just see floor after floor of women who are literally dying. No need to continue to keep these women. And 30 of our women on that list are women who are significantly sick. We have long-timers like Michelle West, who has been in prison for almost 30 years for a drug conspiracy conviction. Michelle deserves opportunity to come out. We have Laz, who is the same situation. We could tick off. So the number 100 is only important because it is we made an effort to get our issue in there when we didn't hear anything about criminal justice reform or abolition or ending incarceration. We wanted to come up with the first 100-day plan for President Biden as well. But as you said, the first 100-day campaign is an ongoing campaign. We started this work under President Obama's administration, and we fought like heck, and we pushed lots of women out as a result of our work. But that work needs to continue now under President Biden. Valerie Jarrett already helped us to understand under President Obama's administration how important it is to center women in this observation and use of the tool of clemency, and in centering women, particularly Black women, in understanding what needs to happen to significantly change this and transform our criminal legal system in this country. So the first 100 women in the first 100 days, we're pleading with President Biden to show the country that he understands that clemency is racial justice. He can really set the tone, a significant tone. And I think he should, because there are other factions that aren't democratic who are pretending to care about this issue, using issues like clemency and criminal justice reform in a very politicized way. And I think that we need to understand that this current administration needs to do it in an earnest way, not as a way to just create a poster person for clemency, but to actually uproot decades of an injustice that these women they have skin in the game. They've been in prison for decades. They deserve a chance to come home. And we are asking him, but our campaign will continue like it did under President Obama. It will continue for as long as President Biden is in office. But we're saying, why wait? This is not a gift. This is a tool that you have been gifted with, President Biden. And you need to use that tool as the President of the United States to correct these injustices and allow these women to return to their families, to their children, who are young adults now. Some of them have children of their own, as long as, like Michelle West's daughter. These women have grandchildren now. It just does not make any sense any longer. And the president has actually said that he will begin commutations under his administration, and he narrowed it to drug convictions. Fine. Mm-hmm. We have a lot of women who are serving drug conviction sentences. Let us provide you with those opportunities and the help to center you in those women and to bring them home. Let's bring Michelle West home. 30 years in prison on a drug conspiracy case is really long enough. Her daughter, Michelle West, is fighting for her mother's life. And what better time to do it during a pandemic where people have actually died in prisons because of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, when we think of clemency and pardons, and of course, the first image that comes to my mind when I saw this, first image that came to my mind was Alice Marie Johnson, who served 21 years in prison. But that's just one woman. You're saying that there are a lot more women who are going through the same thing, just like Alice Marie Johnson, who need the opportunity to be able to get out and get that clemency. Someone listening to this might have a relative or parent or someone that they know who's going through this. You know, I always say incarceration impacts a whole family. For whatever reason, someone goes to prison, it impacts the whole family. It doesn't just impact that one person, it impacts so many people. And I just want to know from you, what's the best way someone can get in touch with you? Because I know, for example, I get a lot of calls from folks at the Amsterdam News for people, just in general, men or women, about issues happening with incarceration from both sides, men and women. But what's the best way that folks can join you, can get in touch with you if they're interested in joining your fight or if they're needing help? What's the best way they can get in touch with you?
Just have them email us at info@thecouncil.us, info@thecouncil.us, and just let us know. We receive just boxes of letters every day. No letter. We have entire teams that work on clemency, that work on these issues, and so no letter goes unread or unopened. We allocate it to whoever is the right team that should address the issue that is in the letters. We are in every single federal prison every month. We have a newsletter that goes out. If you have an incarcerated woman in the federal system, let us know. It also goes into several state prisons around the country, but it goes into every single federal prison in the country. So these are ways. Info at the council.us, and just, let us know what the situation is, or give us the name and federal number of the woman that you're concerned about. We will do everything, and we have never wavered in our goal. Our goal from the time we sat in the prison yard in Danbury, Connecticut, was to end the incarceration of women and girls. That has never changed for us, even when it was not popular, even before the uptick in conversation around abolition. That was our goal, and we mean it. And we will continue to work on these pieces until we can get there, starting with the first 100-day campaign. Please, President Biden, hear us. We've supported you. There's lots of us. There's lots of people in the Black community that stood up because of your issues around criminal justice reform. And we believe you, and we want to support you. And you can start supporting us by recognizing that clemency is racial justice.
All right. Well, I just want to say to you, I think the work that you're doing is absolutely amazing. You're advocating for people that oftentimes don't have a voice, and I commend you for that. Thank you so much for doing the work that you're doing, and thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
We thank the Amsterdam News for caring about this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes this week's podcast. You can pick up the latest edition of the New York Amsterdam News on newsstands and get updates online at amsterdamnews.com. You can also keep up with us on Facebook at NY Amsterdam News and follow us on Twitter at NYAmNews. I'm Cyril Josh Barker. Thanks for listening.